Good evening, folks. Been lollygagging all day long. Made a couple of videos already and uploaded them. But I've got an urge right now to address you with Giving Psychology Way number 129. And this is not something I like to raise because instantly people get a knee-jerk reaction and start calling me racist. And that's a horrible thing because you're not allowed to stand up for your own people. You're not allowed to defend yourself. You have to take full hits and you have to degrade yourself and you have to commit basically ethnic suicide. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. And so what I'm going to tell you is that the evil ones who you don't know about, who you need to know about, have thrown all the other races against us. And the horrible thing is that the evil ones look like us. They look like white people. And I hate to use the terms black and white because those are not very scientific and they're somewhat racist. They're not very specific. And none of us really knows what we are. We got a pretty good idea, but we aren't really sure. So me, I'm mostly Caucasoid. I don't like calling myself white. But I think one of the reasons why they want us to call ourselves by these colors, which don't really fit, is so they can generalize. And so they can discriminate based upon that, instead of accepting the true diversity of all of us on the planet. And right now I've been listening to the Hopi, in particular, talk about native prophecies. And they're talking about it in racist terms. And their perspective is not a very valid perspective. It is a racist perspective. And I know some of the Indian prophecies that some of the wise women came forward and says, we dreamed and we went into the future. And none of our white brothers were there. They were gone. We lost our white brothers. And they found that disturbing. It's about the most wisdom I've heard coming from the native prophecies. They actually saw a possible future in which white people are gone. Now, in case you're wondering, white populations, and I hate using that white stuff, Caucasian populations peaked approximately 1933 at about 1/3 of the Earth's population. And we have been attacked for many decades since then. And it's almost been 100 years since then, as a matter of fact. And we have passed below 6% of the Earth's population. Now, some of that's through miscegenation, through intermarriage, racial mixing. And I'll tell you, one of the funniest things I heard driving across the country a few summers ago, probably about 8 years ago, was one black professional athlete on talk radio talking to another professional athlete. And he was criticizing another black professional athlete. Why? Because he said something you can't say. He said that because his wife was a white woman, his children were superior to the others. I laughed my ass off for several hundred miles on that one because the one black fellow seemed like a really nice guy, and he really felt awkward calling out his fellow athlete on this miscarriage of racial characteristics. So, I guess the black athlete that he was talking about, and maybe this is a universal thing, I don't know. You'll have to tell me, but maybe they figured that when they marry a white woman, they get superior children. There's something to be said for the offspring of mixes. Sometimes they're much weaker, sometimes they're much stronger. Breeding matters. So what I'm getting at is you need to learn who the good guys are and the bad guys are so that you can understand why they're going against us. And this reaches way back pre-biblical times. This goes back 70 or 72,000 years, as near as I can tell. And we have the Chinese and their wonderful writing and civilization to thank for these records. And in their records they said, we didn't see the black woolly-haired ones, the Negroes, the blacks. We didn't see them until the white devils appeared. That's a key thing. You may think they're just saying till the Caucasians appeared. No, they're talking about the white devils. Quiet. Down. Lorraine, down. Down. You're not getting any dinner tonight if you don't get down. Down. What did I say? Down. It's not listening. Bad dog. Down. Now. Good girl. You got to release them right away. You can't let them sit with that bad dog name on them for any length of time at all, because it eats at them. Especially a good dog. It'll eat at a good dog. You got to release them from that. I learned that with my last dog. I didn't realize it was eating at him until after some time and some experience. So, I don't have it all right. I don't understand it all. But I do know this, that Michael the Archangel, apparently had several hats, if you will. And one of those was the captain of a spacecraft that did battle with the evil ones and won and drove their craft crashing to the earth about 72,000 years ago. And they were bigger than we were physically. They had much more leverage, much more strength. And the sad thing is they were so big that they were carnivores and they liked to eat humans. They liked to hunt men. And they predated on the pre-Adamic races here on the planet. They ate them. And it was so bad that the Chinese actually came up with a religion centered around the white devils. They called them dragons. And they have a, what do I want to call it? It's not really a hobby. It's more like a profession. They have prospectors that hunt for dragon's teeth over in China. They're not hunting for a dragon and the dragon's teeth. They're hunting for the large caucasoid skeletons to take the teeth because of the preservation of the DNA inside the enamel in particular. But I think they're actually taking the entire skeletons, especially the ones that we give to the Smithsonian Institution, the Smithsonian Museum in D.C. They all disappear. I don't think they just throw them out. I think they grind them up, and I think they sell them to the bad ones to help keep their DNA strong in the old ways. That's what I think. I could be wrong. In case you're wondering, this myth about Dracula, Count Dracula, it's actually got some reality to it. There was a dude in Transylvania in the tight hills of Romania. He had his castle there, and I did visit it. And the bed in his bedroom was huge. He was a giant. All of royalty in Italy claims they're descended from Count Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. And what was Vlad revered for? He stopped the Turkish invasion. He stopped them from invading. He stopped them dead in their tracks. And he didn't do it because he had a superior army. It's because he psyched them out. He had his men take his own peasants, kill them, sharpen up the trees in a valley he knew the invading army had to walk through, and sharpen up the trees on the hills as well, and impaled his own people, like 20,000 of them. And so this huge invading army that was going to crush his army come marching through. And they saw this horrid thing, miles of it. If this man is willing to do this to his own people, my God, what is he going to do to us? Their hearts sank, and they went back. They didn't invade. So he saved his nation, thus became their hero. But at what a cost? And all of your royalty in Europe claims to descended from this man who was a giant. So you have to understand breeding does matter. And as we've gone along and as we've been breeding and interbreeding and mixing on this planet, we have what's called regression towards the mean. In other words, all of these extremes, the little people, the big people, they start coming out closer to one kind of norm. So regression to the mean means basically your extremes sort of disappear and you go back to the middle of the species, the middle of the race, the average. So all your royalty claims are descended from Vlad the Impaler, and he was a giant. He had giant DNA, which means basically he was a descendant of one of those fallen angels or aliens, or however you want to look at the men and women that were on those spacecraft. Now, the important thing to know for you right now is the black woolly-haired ones were brought by the fallen angels, by the white devils, as their slaves from another planet here. So they brought them here 72,000 years ago. And we have got villages in Africa in which the tribesmen will tell you about their history. And I don't know which one it is. I mean, there's a lot of tribes, sub-tribes. I hate to say subspecies because it makes it sound like I'm talking they're inferior when they're not. I would just say a subclassification. But I'm trying to explain that to you, but I know somebody will take this out of context. And this tribe that's in Africa that you will think is rather primitive will tell you where they came from. They know where they came from. And they identify it as a planet that had 2 stars. It was a binary system. That's where their home was at. They know that. I want to go visit this fellow in Florida. I've wanted to go see him for a few years. He said that he hung out with a German rocket scientist and that they knew their entire history, including off-planet. I'd like to go see him, hang out with them for a while, tap into him, find out what they told him. Because I want to know about that prehistoric, if you will, history, that off-planet history. I want to know about that. The problem is that in our Bible, they screwed it up on us. They have edited it. They have changed the words. They have done things to it to improve it that actually make it more obscure. And so we have a story. Lorraine, good watchdog, quiet. Quiet. Yes, he's there, quiet. Good girl. What I'm getting at is there are 2 warring factions on the planet. And the evil ones know who they are. They know their identity. And they know who we are. But we don't know either of those. We don't know who they are. And we certainly don't know who we are. So my channels have been, the purpose of them is to point that out. And then the evil ones are taking all of the other species, races, if you will, the mixes as well, the offshoots, like the Japanese are a mix. It's a very stable phenotype. They don't want to interbreed anymore. They don't want to mix it up. They love who they are and who they identify with. Japan, fathered by Japheth, and he contributed to their DNA. It's where their skull is slightly different shape. And it also somewhat accounts for their close-knitness. They stay together. When I went to graduate school, the graduate school I went to, one of the reasons I went there is because it had the largest foreign undergraduate population in the world. And I always found that to be a very rich environment that was extremely stimulating. And heck yeah, I wanted that. You know, when you have people that share a perspective with you that you never even thought about. That really opens up your horizons and your vistas. Anyway, to get back at it, the Bible tells us a story, and our big box churches have lied to us about a couple of things. The first thing they lie about is they say angels can't reproduce. Doesn't that sound wonderful and perfect? Sure does. Not true. As a matter of fact, my guess is that angelic DNA, fallen angelic DNA, is more potent than any other DNA on the planet, including more dominant than the Negro DNA. And the Caucasoid DNA is the most regressive. It's the weakest, okay? Let's just spit it out like that. The most dominant and the strongest is Negro. And then your Mongoloid DNA is right in between the two. And in case you're wondering which came first, it's the Mongoloids. They were here first. They've been on the planet for at least 1.75 million years. Caucasoids, we can't be sure of that. We don't have good data on that. But the data indicates that we've been here maybe less than the fallen angels even. We're not really sure. We found skeletons that were 25,000 years old in South America. My guess is that we're the last here. We're the latecomers. And before us, the Negroes were here, brought by the fallen devils as their slaves. And I hate to say it, but it looks like that relationship persisted for quite a bit. I'll put it that way. And so the Bible tells us a quaint story which the churches have told you, oh, there was forbidden fruit. Well, that is the old story. It was forbidden fruit. The fruit that you'd better not touch. You'd better not eat. You'd better not partake of. It turns out that when we look at the original language, that Eve complains that this serpent, this sly one, seduced her. And as a result, she gave birth to his son Cain. And Cain and Abel were half-brothers. Abel's father was Adam. And we have a little incident in the Bible in which both boys, both sons, were offering sacrifice. And according to the long-standing and old traditions, only the oldest son was authorized to make the sacrifice. And that was for the entire family. Yet, here we have both boys making sacrifice, making offerings. And Cain's was not accepted. That was Yahweh's will. That was his choice. And as a result, Cain became jealous of his brother Abel and took a rock and smashed his skull after luring him out to the field to murder him. It was not manslaughter. It wasn't an accident. It was premeditated murder. And then Cain was kicked out of the garden. And Cain's complaint to Yahweh was, "Where will I go? They will kill me out there." Whoa, wait a minute. I thought all men came from Adam. What? There's people out there? How could they come from Adam? Well, it turns out he went east to the land of Nod, to the land of wanderers. This is in the Bible. We have good evidence for it. And there he founded cities and he took wives. And so he took wives from the Mongoloids, from the Mongolians. Some prefer to call it the Chinamen. And then his children, their children, which were half Mongoloid, 1/4 Adamic DNA from his mother Eve, and 1/4 Satanic DNA from his father Gadriel, the name of the fallen angel who impregnated her. They settled in the land of Canaan. They were there with their satanic DNA. This violation of creation, if you will. This was not the order Yahweh wanted. The angels were not supposed to leave their first estate, but they did. And they conspired on Mount Hermon, and we have that alluded to and written to the large part in Genesis chapter 6. And we have it also in the books of Enoch. They conspired because they found the daughters of men fair. They were going to go into them, sex, and take all of them for wives that they wanted, that they wished. Back then, you didn't go and get married and take out a marriage license. The sex act was the marriage act. And so they impregnated these women, and a lot of them died giving birth to these giants and to the men of renown. So that stuff that you think is myth is actually quite true. And by the time Joshua gets into the promised land, right after Moses has died, Yahweh tells Joshua what to do with specific villages that had specific populations. And some of those he told Joshua, to just destroy the men. Some of them they were to keep the women alive. Some of them it was to destroy the men and the women who had known a man. Some of them was to destroy the men, the women, and the women who had not known a man, and the children, and even the animals at times. So he had specific orders for different villages given to him by Yahweh. And your Christianity today wants to say that, he was a mean God. Well, if you'd have been alive back then and seen what those populations were and how disturbed they were, you would realize that this is the only way to go. The Anakim in particular, that word means long necks. Just like a giraffe, we humans have 14 bones in our necks. The giraffe has more cartilage, and the Anakim had more cartilage. So they were known as long necks. That's the type of giant they were. So what I'm getting at is that the warring populations are the descendants of Seth, who took Abel's place, the son subsequently born to Adam and Eve after their son Adam had been murdered. And you have the descendants of Cain. Those are the two warring factions. And then you have the other Enosh or Enoshwi, Asiatics, Mongolians, that were here first, and they're really not part of the fight, except that the devils, the evil ones, the fallen angels, that particular alien group that got here, they are throwing them against us. That's what's going on today. And the problem, as I see it, is even your Native Americans are totally biased against us. Our own people are biased against us. The co-eds in college for several years now, what has their fantasy been? They want to marry a black athlete. They want to marry a professional athletic Negro who has a tremendous income. And these other supposed attributes that really aren't quite true. But that's another matter. So those are the two warring factions. And the devils are destroying the earth. And they're going to destroy everything they can. It's in their nature. I don't think they can stop themselves. As a matter of fact, if we don't stop them, they're going to take the whole planet down. And the little guy outside of our country is going to be in really bad shape because they're going to have free reign to do whatever they want. The problem is that our government has been taken over, totally occupied by the enemy. Our media is also captured, along with our government. Our governments are captured by the enemy. And our media is captured by the enemy. And your big box church is captured by the enemy. And your schools, your public education system, that's totally the enemy as well. Matter of fact, it's irredeemable. And if you want to protect your children, I suggest you fire them all. I suggest you end the public school system and end all taxation for it. I know it's a golden calf. It's a sacred calf. We're not allowed to criticize it. We have to, worship it no matter what. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a good parent, you want to defend your children. You want to protect them from being groomed by and twisted by these miscreants, and you want to protect them overall so they're not exploited. And they are harming your children right now, and they're not going to stop. You can't negotiate that. You just need to pull the plug on the entire system. You need to make the public education system dry up. Then you don't have to argue about a damn thing. What do you do with education? You return it to the locals. You make it responsible to the locals. Parents hire the teachers. They pool their resources together. They can pay them. They can fire them. And the teachers know who they're beholden to then. Parents aren't going to get their place back until they actually pull the plug and scuttle this entire screw system that screws your children and harms them, exploits them, and exposes them to all kinds of degeneration. Really hurts your children. There is no place in the Constitution that requires or dictates any right to an education. And certainly the free education that this government's giving you is not enough to help you to overtake this government and become independent of it. It's all a big psyop. This is the war of good and evil. And right now, you're being suckered. You've been suckered for more than a century into going to war against populations you had no business going to war against. Germany in World War I is the greatest example of that. My God, 51% of our population had German ancestry at the time. How did they make that happen? It's because the evil ones took over our money system and bought everything else out. They corrupted everything, especially the politicians. And my Lord, how corrupt are they today? Yes, it's the fight between good and evil, but what you don't realize is they've knocked down the Caucasian percentage of the world to less than 6%, from 33% in less than 100 years. They mean to genocide us. And these Hopis that talk about the second uprising of the blacks, and they try to characterize that as their freedom, and they're supporting that revolt, if you will, that uprising, they're taking action against us as well at this point. And the Hopi need to be corrected in that. Now, the Hopi have got a heck of a ground to stand on to accuse us of wrongdoing. I admit that. I concede that. But do you really want to genocide the only people who can defend Mother Earth against these evil ones? Do you really want to eradicate? Because that's what you've been doing. You've been neutralizing the only ones who can take care of this place and take care of you. And you may say, well, you haven't done a very good job yet. Well, you know something? I agree. As a matter of fact, we shouldn't help you anymore. We've helped you to death. That's what's happened in Alaska. We've helped the natives to death. We've made them dependent upon us. Big problem. The problem you have is once we're out of the way, they're coming for you. You understand? All life on the earth hangs in the balance. Do you understand the very existence of the planet may hang in the balance too? These guys that are here don't have a very good track record. Look at the asteroid belt. Did they destroy that planet? Look at Mars. Look at the existence of roads and civilization and cities on the surface of Mars. Did they destroy the atmosphere on Mars, thereby destroying all of those peoples? these evil ones aren't going to stop until we stop them. And right now, America is under attack. And they're attacking us in a way that we will not wake up in time. That's my fear. Prove me wrong. Please, please let me be wrong about that. We do need to reorganize our militias. The Central Federal Communist Government deprived us of our militias in approximately 1902 with the Militia Efficiency Act, otherwise known as the Dick Act of 1902. The militias were not doing very well, but that's up to the people. We need our militias. States like Arizona never had a militia. I was trying to get that other Republican candidate to make the announcement. She'd be governor right now if she'd announced that she was going to form the Arizona State Militia. Men would have flocked to her. She didn't want to listen to me. Instead, she dwelled on the fact that she didn't want there to be any bloodshed. I don't think you have a choice. And if there is bloodshed, then let it be us taking care of the other side. It won't be a lot of it. Yes, if they come after us, yes, there'll be some bloodshed. But look at what we did over in Nevada. Look at what we did over in Oregon. They actually had to murder one of those guys to get that thing to back off and shut it down. I still want to take the former governor to task for the murder. Lavoy Finicum was murdered. The FBI showed up and joined up with the Oregon State Police, state troopers, and they murdered the man. He knew they were going to kill him. That is why he told everyone in the car to duck and to stay in the car. And he got outside of the car and put his hands up and high, because he knew they were there to kill him and they were going to kill him. He wasn't even carrying a gun on himself. And the poor people in that car ducked down as the bullets whizzed past their heads. He saved everybody in that car by stepping outside and sacrificing himself. He knew what he was doing, and he did it willingly. And your governor, Kate Brown, authorized that, and they covered up that murder. You had 2 FBI executioners, basically, from the execution section of the FBI. You don't think the FBI has assassins? Go read the book by, oh my God, Michael Collins Piper, Final Judgment. He names some of the assassins, the FBI assassins in that book. And you need to understand that J. Edgar Hoover himself, in reverse speech engineering, says that he killed them all. He killed every eyewitness to the Kennedy assassination. Just like in Los Angeles, the eyewitnesses to that shooting that had all those shooting teams, and there were no damn bump stocks, there were full automatics, and these were trained shooters, several teams of them. We failed to investigate that as well, and they murdered the eyewitnesses to cover it up. Young people were snuffed by the FBI once again. The FBI did the Oklahoma City bombing. Your ATF discovered it 6 weeks in advance and tried to stop it. And the FBI told the ATF to stand down while they pulled the building. And then 9 months after the bombing, they escorted their bomber, outside of the country. He was associated with the Red Brigade in Germany. Andy Straussberg, something like that. He took the job when one of our own men refused to take it, and that was Cody Snodgrass, otherwise known as Golden Elk. He was offered $500,000 in advance and $500,000 on completion of the job, and he told them, it's on American soil, I'm not doing it. And they went after him and framed him up and put him in prison for quite a while. His book's out there. He's got CDs of it. Go buy his books and find out for yourself. Support the man. Spend the $15 or $20 on a CD to get a copy of his book. In 9/11, I'm sorry. That wasn't done with the airplanes. That was done with nanothermite planted, painted on the structure by Jeb Bush's business did that. And then, of all things, you've got the Bush and the Clinton families who do drug deals in Mena, Arkansas, and New Hampshire. New Hampshire, where the opioid hub, the center of it, is at right now. These families are horrible families. And in case you're wondering where they come from the fallen angels. Yes, they're those descendants. They changed their names. Not only that, they all come from that same giant over there in Transylvania, Vlad the Impaler. And on top of that, they come through Khazaria, which is pretty much where the Ukraine is today. And the Khazarians had a lot of help converting to Judaism about 700 AD. Because when they heard the Bulgar, the chief of the Khazarians, was converting himself and his nobles to Judaism, the Edomite Jews at Mount Seir in the southern part of Israel migrated northward to help them convert, help them get used to their new religion. And they took their DNA with them. So it's not all Khazarians. Don't go around saying that, that's for sure. But I will tell you this. There's a group of fellows that know more than I do, and there's a woman among them, as a matter of fact. She's kind of a counterculture. She doesn't appeal to me much. But the fact that she's involved with these gentlemen and knows this really is something else that impresses me. Turns out they're all from the same suburb of ancient Babylon. And I can't remember the name. I'll have to look it up. It's something like Radonites. But remember, there's a group in the Bible called Radonites. It's different. So I'm not sure what the name is of this group. All I know is they come out of ancient Babylon, the same suburb. So they're all related. They're all from the same neighborhood. And while we're at it, let's talk about the people that came out of Brooklyn and out of the Bronx. The Jews that went over to Russia and did the Bolshevik Revolution, the October Surprise, and took the Tsar and his family captive and murdered them. You need to understand, that was planned and launched from our shores. It was financed by one of the partners in Kuhn Loeb Bank, I believe. His name was Schiff, not Adam Schiff, Jacob Schiff. And we had World War I going after the Germans because of Jacob Schiff. Jacob Schiff called President Taft out on his promise, his campaign promise to end all of the visas for the Russians. They didn't want them coming over here. They targeted the Tsar. Why did they target the Tsar? Because the Tsar saved the United States of America during our Civil War. If it wasn't for the Tsar and his family, if it wasn't for their wisdom and their stepping in, we wouldn't have made it past the Civil War. The Rothschilds, with their different nations and their navies, were sitting offshore, waiting to take us over and take us down. Yes, the Jesuits were involved in the South making that happen. And it wasn't about slavery. It was about taxation without representation, because the federal government was getting $8 of the $10 million it ran on from the South. And it wasn't a fair deal. But they still went after the South and taxed and tariffed them unfairly. The South was right. And Abraham Lincoln actually destroyed the Republic, the Jeffersonian Republic. He and his radical Republicans destroyed the Republic. Lorraine, quiet. It's definitely past her dinner time, way past it. Oh well. She hasn't been a very good dog today. I mean, she keeps barking when I tell her not to. Lorraine, quiet. What did I say? Oh boy, we got a little problem here. I need you to understand this battle is bigger than we are. The enemy is just huge. Even J. Edgar Hoover exclaimed that the average man is faced with a conspiracy so vast he can't even imagine it. He could never wrap his mind around it. And then Woodrow Wilson, who was honeypotted, changed the Constitution so that they could put through a communist income tax. And he established the Federal Reserve System whereby the enemies took us over. And that's how they got us into World War I, manipulating us into it. There's so much to this stuff. There's so much I want to tell you. But the main thing right now is you need to wake up and realize we are under attack. The railroads, those aren't accidents. Those are planned attacks from our central government. Not from the Chi-Coms. They're probably cheering it on, but they're not doing it to us. It's our own people. It's like 9/11. It was a combination inside job and outside job. It could not have been done without help from the inside. And your vice president at the time, Liz Cheney's father, sat there coordinating this thing. They never investigated 9/11 properly, did they? They hauled off all of the evidence. They wouldn't allow us to examine it. There's a few pieces of it around, though. There's a piece in New Zealand, and there's a piece in Phoenix as well. Maybe we'll find nanothermite on those parts if we take a look at them. You need to understand you've been had. We've all been had. I know it's hard to accept, but that's the case. And we've been had ever since then. And if Trump had lived up to his campaign promises and returned this nation to the people, we wouldn't be here right now. But you are going to worship the man and put him back in office. I'm not totally against it, mind you. I don't see anybody else who's quite as good. But I do know this. That man is going to have to be humbled by Yahweh. Yeah, he's going to be humbled by Yahweh, all right. And I do not like that governor in Florida who's being set up to be the next president. He is I am bought off all over the place. You know who's supporting him? Georgie's supporting him, very secretly in the background. He supports these weird candidates that I don't quite agree with, but they set it all up. They've been running this scam for so long that the electorate has not been in charge of this country for more than a century. You're going to have to take some charge, and you're going to have to form your militias, private and state. Why? Because you're going to have to guard the infrastructure. These people aren't going to stop their attacks until we stop it. Go get yourself a rifle. Get yourself a handgun. In the old days, we were required to have several arms. A rifle, a smoothbore musket, because it was quicker to reload, a handgun or a pistol, and a short sword. We all had to have that by law. That's your gun control law back then at the founding of the nation. And by the way, they had full automatics back then. They had short-barreled shotguns and short-barreled rifles, only we didn't call them short-barreled. Nobody cared about the length on the barrel. It was up to the individual who was carrying it. You know, a lot of people didn't want that short barrel. It was up to the individual. That's back when we were a free nation. Today you're treated like a criminal because you want something of an in-between length that they can't make up. and they can't make decisions on. And you want selective fire. I mean, my God, the bolt-action rifle was designed for war, and yet they've got you convinced it's the semi-automatic stuff and selectable fire that was designed for war. I don't know what to tell you. I just don't know what to tell you. Whatever arm you bear in defense of your liberty, your life, your nation, that's legal. That's your choice. It's not the government's choice. They took those things away because they refused. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to take the guns away. My God, when I was a little boy, the guns were in Sears and Roebuck catalog, and they were cheap, and they were delivered to the house. They took that stuff away from you. They never solved the Kennedy assassination, but they sure took your guns away. Any of these people that are going against the Second Amendment should be put in prison for a violation of their oath of office for a minimum of 1 year. No suspensions on that. Dianne Feinstein ought to spend a year in prison. I don't give a damn what her age is. How long did she have that Chinese spy driving her car for her? 20 years? Oh boy, I wonder what that is up there on my eye. Well, I'll have to check that out in the mirror. It feels like I've got something. Well, I had something up there. It's gone now. Folks, your nation has come apart. You've been destroyed. You can't fight these people directly. You can't do it. How are you going to take on your local police? How are you going to take on your FBI? How are you going to take on the federal government at all? You know something? You can do it. There's no problem with it. You just have to form your militias. And we're not talking about going off wild, half-cocked, or any of that. We're talking about having order, having a commanding officer, having supervision above you, somebody to guide you, somebody taking responsibility for your behavior, your actions. I mean, when you have a problem that you can't figure out, you take it to your commanding officer. If he can't figure it out, he just keeps going up the chain of command. It has to be disciplined. That is we the people. That's the part of our government that's missing. We don't have the people running the show like we did before. Back when this nation was founded, when the legislators failed to do their duty, the militia would surround legislators and not let them out until they finished doing their job. That happened at Exeter. The incident at Exeter, when they moved the state capital from Portsmouth into Exeter because they felt Portsmouth was too vulnerable to the British Navy. All right, folks. I think I've given you enough to think about. So we're going to call it right now. This is Giving Psychology Way number 128. Folks, take this to heart. Take action. Don't sit there asleep at the wheel and allow them to continue to destroy the infrastructure, because they'll destroy it all. And when they get to a certain level, they'll announce that you lost the war. Now you have to hand over your guns. And what do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do when they get your guns? Yahweh bless.